Welcome to the deep dive. We dig into complex topics, look at the research, and, well, try to give you the core framework so you really get it. Today, we are diving into something incredibly elegant inside our own bodies. How endocrine axes are regulated, those chemical messenger systems. We've got a stack of sources here looking at feedback loops, those regulatory rhythms, and really importantly, how clinicians figure out what's wrong when these systems break down.
That's the key, isn't it?
Mhm.
The body's main challenge is keeping hormones just right. You don't want too much, you don't want too little. It's a constant balancing act. So we're going to unpack the actual mechanisms the body uses for that balance, and hopefully you'll walk away with the high-yield logic for spotting hormone failure.
Okay, let's get into it, and maybe start with the most dramatic mechanism. Amplification seems like a good place. This idea of feedback loops. The hormone itself controls its own production. That's the basic idea.
Exactly. The output regulates the input. And usually, like 99% of the time, that's negative feedback. Negative feedback is your stabilizer. It's the standard operating procedure. If you have enough hormones circulating, say, thyroid hormone, that hormone tells the glands higher up, the pituitary and hypothalamus, hey, ease off, we're good. It shuts down more production, keeps things level. Think of birth control pills artificially doing this.
Right. It puts the brakes on, prevents overshooting, but then
Yeah.
there's the exception, the opposite mechanism, positive feedback.
Yeah, this one's much rarer, and instead of hitting the brakes, it slams the accelerator. The hormone actually stimulates more of its own upstream production signals. It creates this self-amplifying loop.
Which sounds kind of dangerous, doesn't it? Why would the body want to runaway train like that?
Well, because sometimes you need a massive short-term surge. Stabilization isn't the goal. A big, decisive event is. And the classic example, the one you really need to know, is ovulation.
Ah, okay. The reproductive axis.
Right. Let's trace that path quickly. You've got the hypothalamus making GnRH, gonadotropin-releasing hormone,
That talks to the pituitary.
which then releases LH and FSH, luteinizing hormone, and follicle-stimulating hormone.
And those tell the ovary to get busy making estrogen, specifically estradiol.
Exactly. Now, here's where it gets really interesting and where the feedback flips.
Because usually estrogen would put the brakes on LH and FSH, right? Negative feedback.
Correct. Low or moderate levels of estrogen do exactly that. They keep LH-FSH production low and steady. It's conservative.
But the sources say if estrogen climbs high and stays high for about 2 days, roughly.
That's the trigger. Sustained high estrogen doesn't inhibit anymore. It does the opposite. It flips the switch to positive feedback.
Wow. So the high estrogen actually tells the hypothalamus to release more GnRH.
Yes, and it makes the pituitary more sensitive to that GnRH, so it pumps out way more LH.
So the product estrogen is driving the upstream factories harder.
Precisely. You get this massive short-lived spike, the LH surge. And that surge is the specific biological trigger needed for the ovarian follicle to rupture and release the egg, ovulation.
That's incredible. The same molecule, estrogen, doing two totally opposite jobs based purely on how much of it there is and for how long.
It's really efficient, biologically speaking.
Yeah.
Same sensor, different interpretation based on signal strength. So the key takeaway here, negative feedback is for stability, day-to-day management. Positive feedback is for these acute, necessary explosions like ovulation or, say, uterine contractions during labor.
Okay, that positive feedback loop is fascinating. But let's circle back to the everyday workhorse, negative feedback, using the thyroid axis as the example. That's mostly about stability.
Absolutely. The thyroid axis is like the textbook case for homeostasis through negative feedback. It starts up top. Hypothalamus releases TRH, thyrotropin-releasing hormone,
TRH popes the pituitary,
which then releases TSH, thyroid-stimulating hormone.
and TSH is the signal to the thyroid gland itself, telling it to produce its main hormones, T4 and T3.
Right. And T4 and T3 basically set the metabolic rate for, well, almost every cell in your body, how fast things run. So the negative feedback here is crucial. You don't want your metabolism accidentally cranked up to 11 all the time. As T3 and T4 levels rise in the blood, they circulate back up and tell the hypothalamus and pituitary to stop releasing TRH and TSH.
We've got enough fuel thing.
Exactly. And if T3, T4 levels drop too low, the inhibition lifts, TRH and TSH production ramps back up and the thyroid makes more. It's a self-correcting thermostat.
And this really matters clinically because when this thermostat breaks, the symptoms can be, well, pretty systemic and sometimes vague, right? Easy to miss.
Very true. If you have too much thyroid hormone hyperthyroidism, everything speeds up. You might see rapid weight loss, heart racing, feeling hot all the time, baby tremors.
And the opposite, too little thyroid hormone hypothyroidism. That's more common, isn't it?
Yes. And that leads to things slowing down. Chronic fatigue, feeling cold, unexplained weight gain, constipation, a slow heart rate, even changes like dry skin or brittle hair.
Okay, so let's use the case from the sources. A 33-year-old woman comes in. She's tired all the time, gained weight, constipated. Her skin's dry, hair's brittle, and her pulse is low, like 48. Labs show low T3 and T4.
Right, so we know the end product, T3, T4, is low. The system isn't making enough metabolic fuel. The big diagnostic question now is, where did the chain break? Was it the thyroid gland itself, the pituitary, or the hypothalamus? This is the 3 levels of failure concept.
Locating the fault.
Exactly. We classify it based on location. Primary disease means the problem is in the final organ itself, so in this case, the thyroid gland.
Okay,
Secondary disease means the failure is one level up, at the pituitary gland, the middle manager.
got it.
And tertiary disease means the problem is the very top, the hypothalamus, the main control center.
So, low T3, T4, how do you actually figure out which of those 3 it is? Is there a clear rule, like a diagnostic shortcut from the labs?
Absolutely. This is the core logic. You look at the upstream signals, particularly TSH. Think about that factory line analogy again.
Okay, so T3, T4 is low, the factory isn't producing. What's the boss, the pituitary, doing? We check the TSH level.
Right. If T3, T4 is low, BET, the TSH is high. What does that tell you?
It tells me the pituitary is screaming for more. It sees the low T3, T4, and it's trying its hardest to stimulate the thyroid.
Exactly. The pituitary is working fine, it's just that the thyroid gland itself isn't responding. The factory is broken. That's primary hypothyroidism. The problem is in the thyroid, and this is, by far, the most common cause.
Okay, that makes sense. High TSH points to the thyroid itself being the issue. But what if T3, T4 is low, and the TSH is also low?
Now, if the factory isn't working and the boss isn't yelling,
Then the problem isn't the factory workers, it's the management. The issue must be higher up, either the pituitary or the hypothalamus.
precisely. Low T3, T4 with low TSH means the failure is upstream. The initial command signal is missing or weak.
So how do we tell if it's the pituitary is secondary or the hypothalamus
Yeah.
is tertiary? They both result in low TSH, right?
Correct. That's when you need to look even higher, ideally at TRH from the hypothalamus, although TRH testing isn't as common clinically, the principle holds. If T3, T4 is low, TSH is low, but TRH is high.
Okay, so the hypothalamus is trying, it's sending out TRH, but the pituitary isn't responding by making TSH.
Bingo. That pinpoints the failure at the pituitary. That's secondary hypothyroidism.
And the last scenario, T3, T4 low, TSH low, and TRH is also low.
Then the problem is right at the top. The hypothalamus itself isn't initiating the cascade. That's tertiary hypothyroidism.
It's quite logical when you trace it back like that. You just follow the signals until one drops off.
It really simplifies the diagnostic approach. So the quick memory hack. Primary organ failure, look for high TSH. Secondary pituitary failure. Tertiary hypopituitary failure. Both secondary and tertiary usually have low TSH.
That's a really clear framework for locating the breakdown. But hormones aren't just about levels, right? You mentioned the dynamism. It's not just how much, but when.
Absolutely. Feedback loops maintain the correct average level, but the pattern of release is just as critical. Timing is everything. One key timing aspect is pulsatile secretion. Hormones aren't just dripped out steadily like an IV, they're released in bursts or pulses
Why? Why not just a constant trickle?
because of the receptors on the target cells. If they were constantly bombarded with the hormone, they'd basically get tired and stop listening. It's called receptor desensitization or downregulation. Releasing the hormone in pulses keeps the receptors fresh and responsive, allows them to reset between bursts.
Like knocking on a door versus leaning on the doorbell continuously.
Good analogy. And we saw this with GnRH earlier. It has to be pulsed to stimulate FSH and LH release effectively.
Right, and you mentioned the clinical twists.
Exactly. If you give GnRH continuously, using a long-acting synthetic version, a GnRH agonist, you override the natural pulse. This continuous signal desensitizes the pituitary receptors. Instead of stimulating FSH-LH, it shuts their production down completely.
So you use a stimulatory hormone continuously to achieve inhibition.
Yes. It's a powerful pharmacological tool based entirely on exploiting that need for pulsatility. It's used to suppress the reproductive system in conditions like endometriosis or certain cancers. The timing flips the effect.
Fascinating. So we have pulses. What about broader timing, like time of day?
That's the next layer, circadian rhythms. Many hormone levels follow a roughly 24-hour cycle, tied to our sleep-wake pattern. Their normal level actually changes predictably throughout the day. And ignoring this can lead to misdiagnosis.
Cortisol's the big one here, right? The stress hormone axis.
Definitely. Cortisol and its upstream signal from the pituitary, ACTH, have a very strong circadian rhythm. Levels are highest in the very early morning just before you wake up. They help get you going for the day.
Gives you that morning boost.
Sort of, yeah. Then levels gradually decline throughout the day, reaching their lowest point late at night, usually during deep sleep.
So if you suspect someone has too much cortisol, like in Cushing's syndrome, you can't just draw their blood randomly at, say, 2 p.m.
Exactly. A level that might look normal or even low in the morning could actually be abnormally high if measured late at night when it should be rock bottom.
So how do clinicians test for Cushing's then, knowing this rhythm?
They often specifically test when the level should be lowest. A common test is the late-night salivary cortisol. You collect saliva around midnight. In a healthy person, cortisol should be practically undetectable then. If it comes back high, it means the normal circadian rhythm is lost. The body isn't shutting off cortisol production like it should. That points strongly towards Cushing's. The failure to follow the rhythm is the diagnostic clue.
Okay, so pulses, daily rhythms. What else influences the right level? Does it change over a lifetime?
Absolutely. That's the final piece. Life stage changes. The normal range for a hormone isn't fixed forever. It's a set range, not a single set point, and that range shifts dramatically with age and developmental stage.
Like growth hormone.
Perfect example. Growth hormone levels are naturally very high during childhood and adolescence to drive growth, then they plummet in adulthood once growth is complete. What's normal for a 14-year-old would be pathological in a 40-year-old.
And reproductive hormones, obviously.
Right. They're very low before puberty, surge during reproductive years, and then decline again with menopause or andropause. The normal baseline totally changes. Even thyroid and cortisol ranges shift subtly across the lifespan. The system constantly recalibrates its targets.
Okay, so putting it all together, it's not just about having the right amount, but the right amount at the right time, released in the right pattern, within a range that's appropriate for your current stage of life.
That's a great summary.
Yeah.
Hormone regulation is this really complex four-dimensional dance. You've got the pulsatile release, the circadian rhythms, the shifting life stage ranges, and overseeing it all, those two feedback systems, mostly negative, with that occasional positive feedback surge.
Maybe the one sentence takeaway then is, hormones come in pulses, they swing predictably through the day, their target range changes as we age, but feedback loops constantly work to keep them within that appropriate range.
That captures it beautifully. It highlights the dynamism and the control.
Which leads to a final thought, maybe something provocative for our listeners to consider. We've talked about how the hypothalamus controls the pituitary, which controls the target gland, like the thyroid. And we know timing pulsatility, circadian rhythm is set high up, mainly by the hypothalamus. So, could a problem that looks like simple primary organ failure, say the thyroid just isn't working, TSH is high, could that sometimes originate much earlier as a subtle disruption in the timing signal from the hypothalamus?
That's a really interesting point. Like maybe the pulses of TRH aren't quite right or the circadian signal is slightly off.
And over time, that subtle timing issue puts stress on the whole axis, eventually leading the thyroid gland itself to appear like it's failing, even though the root cause started higher up, messing with the rhythm first.
It definitely raises the question. When we diagnose something as primary failure, are we always sure the upstream timing mechanisms were perfectly fine beforehand? Or could subtle rhythmic disruptions be an earlier, harder-to-detect stage of the problem? Something to think about.